If I got a minute, let me give you two quick ones.
Okay.
One's called temptation bundling. And what temptation bundling is when you marry something positive with something you don't want to do. So if you don't want to exercise, you exercise with a friend. Don't want to exercise, you exercise with headphones and your favorite music. You don't want to do the laundry and the ironing, you watch a movie while you're doing it. So you marry something positive with something negative. So when I do my income tax, I'm a sports buff. I have it all set up in my den, and I'm watching football, which is my favorite sport, watching football or baseball or golf. And I'll do it for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm making my notes on my income tax.
What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh Rephun, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes.
The truth tastes funny as it always does. And today is no different. Today our guest is Patrick Sanaghan. Pat has written a book called How to Be a Better Procrastinator, which automatically inspires a little bit of humor. But the fact is, this is an incredibly useful and proactive book because about 20 to 25% of the adult population, has chronic procrastination as a negative habit. And we have lots of stress and anxiety, guilt about not getting things done that we're supposed to do. And all of the emotions surrounding this stuff is what we're going to talk about today. So Pat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hersh. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with the easy stuff, which is what prompted you personally to get into this, into a book like this?
Well, I was a very busy consultant. I have a small consulting firm that plays mostly in the higher ed space, and I was on the road 150, 160 days a year. I mean, I was out of town a lot, and never had a lot of time on my hands. Then COVID hit, and all of a sudden, I'm doing Zoom meetings and not getting on planes, and I had more time in my adult life than I ever had before. And I have a pretty big office. And what I had done over the years, because I've been always trying to manage my procrastination, is I have snippets and magazines and research articles and videotapes and audio tapes about this topic called procrastination. And I said, maybe I should just take some time here and write about this because it causes myself and other people a lot, like you said, stress and anxiety. And I've learned a few things over the last 30 years about the topic. So I'd written 12 books already, so I know how to write a book. But this is the one I had the most fun with because it dealt with something I was dealing with all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned to me in another conversation that this one felt special because it was really practical in terms of its ability to help people. And in fact, in creating the book, you also had the procrastinator in mind, right? In terms of how you structured the book.
Yes. What happens with procrastinators, they're not going to probably start in page 1, and then
right.
Go to page 2. They'll flip and flip and flip and see if there's something there that's interesting. And knowing that I'm a procrastinator, you open up in any page and there'll be something quick and practical and research based. And then about 20% of the people start at the back of the book. When anyone, you just look at the back of the book, and I've got the 10 big lessons of procrastination in the back. So it's designed for people who like to move around a little bit and get 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and you'll learn something. So it really is designed for everybody, a learning style, but especially for procrastinators.
Yeah. And so people have a sense. Tell us a little bit about your work as a consultant and what your job has been like and how procrastinating was affecting that.
Yeah, I in the book, I call myself a productive procrastinator. There's only been a couple areas of my adult life or professional life where I kind of procrastinated on some things. But I spent a lot of time in the higher ed space, usually with strategic planning, helping universities and campuses think about the future and how to plan to kind of do the path forward. I also do a fair amount of work with presidential transitions. So when a new president comes onto a campus, that's a big deal. And how do you make sure that transition process really works well And then the third bucket really is around teams. How do you make sure executive teams, which are all very smart people, but a lot of times have not had any experience on how do you work together as a team so you can really leverage your talent and your time really well. Where it shows up, like the procrastination habit, is I get caught with details. And one is with invoicing. So I just finished a 3-week gig, as it were, in 3 different clients, 3 different states. I've got mileage, I've got hotel bills, I've got different rates I charge for different things, meals, and I put all the receipts in kind of a big bag, big clear plate, which is probably not the smartest thing to do, but that's how I kind of do it. People say, "Oh, get Quicken and just procrastinators aren't going to do Quicken." I can assure you.
No.
And then I've got this big bag when I get back, and I go, "Oh boy, I don't want to do that." And yet, to get paid, I have to have the invoice, right? And each CFO has got some different rules and regulations. Each state has different rules and regulations. So it's the one area that still is pretty difficult for me professionally is doing my invoices. But I've come up with some structures and some practices that gets me through that and gets me going on the invoice so I can actually get paid. But it's still one of those things that's still a sticky wicket for me.
Well, yeah, and I'll ask you about some of those strategies to share with the audience in a minute. But I think a lot of us may be almost like, we're procrastinators, but we know that there's a certain amount that we have to do. And so, for example, I've done that thing too. When I used to do a lot of business trips and I was in sales for several years and I would travel to certain markets over and over again, I would have these bags of receipts. I was very meticulous about keeping the receipts, but that was it. That was as far as I wanted to go with it. Having a bag of receipts was plenty. Then the old school way of, I don't know how it's even done now because it's not, everything is, so many things are digital now and everything is a lot easier. But, you had to tape the receipt to the sheet and write down what the thing was for and then do all that. And it's like, and I know a lot of people do this. It was like, oh, well, I'll do that one day a month. Or I'll do that one day. I'll do nothing but that. Does compartmentalizing into picking a task that you really, really hate, that you really don't want to do, and just saying, I'm going to do it that day, does that help?
It helps some procrastinators. What really helps is a couple things, is that if the thought of you spending a whole day doing these invoices and the tapes and things like that can get very overwhelming for procrastinators. So in this last trip, I have 3 different clients. I just said, okay, week 1, let's do 1 client. Not all 3, because it had been intimidating to me. 1 client and do it right. So it's chewable chunks. You don't have to tackle the whole thing. You can work 15, 20 minutes and then take a little bit of a break, 15 and 20 minutes, take a little bit of a break. And it's also really helpful to have, and I resisted this years ago, have some kind of reward. So if you've done your 20 or 30 minutes of doing an invoice that you don't really like to do, then do something good for yourself. That could be a latte, that could be a walk in the garden, that could be talking to a friend. I'd say stay away from social media because that's very attractive to procrastinators, and they'll get on Twitters and all these other things, and 3 days later, they're wondering what happened. Yeah. But you don't have to do everything at a big bucket at a time. Chewable chunks really works, and also having rewards. We call those reward mapping, so that after the task you can give yourself something nice and pleasant. It tends to increase motivation.
Yeah, and you had another one that was making your progress visible.
Absolutely.
Right.
What I have every day is I don't know if you can see that. Unfortunately,
not really. Yeah.
It's a yellow.
Oh, there I see it now.
There we go. And it's yellow by design because I can see it a block away. And then I usually have 5 to 6 things, no more than 5 or 6 things I need to do every day. Like today, I've got you at 1:30. And then when I do something, you can see here, I score it out with big black marker, and it feels wonderful. And I have that right in front of me while I'm working. So an agenda that you can see and then score it out really with something bold can really be helpful. And then number 3 gets done, number 4 gets done. So it really makes you feel successful and increases your motivation to complete all 5 or 6. Years ago, I would have 10 things to do on my agenda list, which is ridiculous. And because you get to 8 or 9, which is huge, and you still feel I didn't get to 10, so I had a bad day. But a buddy of mine said, I don't do any more than 5 a day, Pat. I said, really? And he was very successful, ran a law firm. And I said, 5 or 6? He said, absolutely. You should try
Yeah.
it. I did it for a week, and it's made I'm more effective. I get more done, and I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah, I mean, I need a few. What I've fallen off of doing that I had been doing, but I have stopped a little is mapping that stuff out the night before. You know, sitting down the night before and saying, well, here are going to be my priorities for tomorrow. I do it in my calendar, but
Yep.
having the notepad, visible to me is always a really good thing. But I try to have a new page every day
Yep.
with things to do. I have heard the theory that you should have just one major thing that you need to do every day, and that's probably good for focus, but it probably doesn't give you that reward of not the reward, but the acknowledgement, the visual acknowledgement
Right.
of breaking things down and getting
Yeah,
them done.
and for some people that works. I mean, I read all this stuff, Cal Newport stuff, and deep work, and focusing on one thing. But most of us have very complex lives. I can't just focus on one thing. There's 4 or 5 things every day that I need to be doing well. I can block out a big chunk of time, like 2 or 3 hours, to work on the most important thing. But it's that procrastinators find that very, very, very hard to do. So
Yeah.
if you can focus, that's great. Here's one quick note: distractions are deadly for procrastinators. So if there's noise in your environment, or there's people talking, down the hallway, or there's music blaring. Now, some of my colleagues play music all the time. When I
Yeah.
hear music, it just blows my mind. So I have to go to a quiet place. So I've got a couple places I go to, whether it be a local library. There's a room there that I can kind of rent for the day, and then I have a home office I can work with, and then I have a kind of professional office I can work with. But distractions are deadly for procrastinators.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a person who's always liked to work with music
Yep.
or some kind of stimulation. I
Yep.
used to, for a while, I had the TV on when I don't even have a TV in my office, but
Right.
when you don't need one these days with the computer, you have too much stimulus with the phone and the computer
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
begin with. But I do like having a certain kind of music when I'm working, and I'll pick a music that's not going to distract me. Sometimes it's music I'm so familiar with that it can't distract me. It's
Yeah.
almost like,
In the background.
just so comforting and so
Yeah.
comfortable.
Well,
But
I
let's
have
talk.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
I have a lot of colleagues that they like to play music, and what they try to stay away from, which is like you've already figured it out, is things with lyrics. But if there's jazz,
Uh-huh.
if there's fusion, or there's band music or something like that, you don't really have to pay attention to it. It's just kind of comforting, and it gets them very focused, which I can't understand because I hear the band music and go, oh my God, what anthem is that? And so it works for
Mhm.
some people and doesn't work for some other people. But distractions are deadly for most procrastinators.
Now, let's talk about what makes a procrastinator, the habitual versus the psychological impetus. What's your finding on that?
Yeah, well, it really, procrastination is a habit. And it's a tough habit because what happens is there's usually a noxious task that you have to do, whether it be something you've never done before, something that's really complicated, something that's boring, and you just don't want to do it. And what happens is a lot of feelings get generated. You had mentioned earlier about anxiety and stress, overwhelmed, dread. Oh, I just can't. There's no way I can tackle this. How can I write a book? And those feelings are very intense. And the minute you step away from the task, all those
Yeah.
negative feelings just completely disappear. Now, up here, you say, "Oh, I still got to do that income tax thing," but right now, I feel relief, and that's the hook. It just keeps on hooking you. And one of the ways to break through that, which is not easy to do, is if you learn to meditate 10 minutes a day, and you can begin to experience just watching your thoughts without reacting to them. That's one what they call it kind of a strategic wedge. That's something that can kind of break the procrastination habit. But a lot of people who procrastinate don't like meditation. It makes them more anxious. So that's why you got to come up with some other structures and other practices to manage this. But just watching your emotions and not reacting, just naming it, saying, right now I feel anxious. Okay, I feel anxious. But
Yeah.
instead of being reactive to it, just naming the emotion can lessen the power of it.
Yeah. In meditation, they call it noting.
Yes.
Noting. I found that to be really, really powerful. And just, it doesn't work. What's interesting is it works for me in a work setting because I think more than anything, I associate meditation with my work day and my, and it's had good influences on my life. But, in the moment, dealing with kids or dealing with some kind of crazy, you're on a road trip or something like that,
Right.
noting may not
Right. Right.
help. But when you open an email or you get a call or you see something, you see a trend or you see, stuff's going on and things are starting to pile up or whatever it might be, you can take that deep breath and take note of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And the fact that I have it as a resource in the middle of the day. Hey, you
Good.
know what? I'm just going to meditate for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I tend to do it for 15 minutes, but I think what you were talking about, a lot of people, they give up,
Yep.
meditate. I've been doing it for 3 years now. I think it took time to be able
Yes, it takes time.
to separate my thoughts. I used to start to meditate and then, which is a natural thing that happens, is it triggers when you take your mind off a topic, it triggers your activity. So now maybe that topic that you were worried about, now that you've taken a moment to step away from it, now you're getting responses to it. So you sit there and you start doing the meditation, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to write that down. I got that thing.
Right.
So you
Right.
barely get through a couple minutes. But that brings us to stresses.
Yep.
Stresses around stalling that people feel.
Oh, absolutely. They don't want to do the task. One of the things that procrastinators got to get, and I just want to backtrack a second. You've learned to meditate, so that's a tool that you have.
Yeah.
So what you want to have is a half a dozen tools that you can pull out and use. So the fact that you can meditate, and you've done it for 3 years, that's a nice strategy. You can say to yourself, okay, I'm getting a little overwhelmed here. Let me just Z out for about 10 minutes. And that's a nice little tool. The challenge with procrastinators around the stress and the anxiety is they tend to be very reactive to it, and they want to get away from the task. And it's starting for procrastinators is the hardest part. So if you can create a routine or a ritual of some kind, that can help. So I'll give you an example. I walk 10,000 steps a day. I used to be able to run, but I've gotten older and I can't do that anymore. And I feel very proud of the fact I do 10,000. But if I'm home, I can do 10,000 steps a day. And it's the first thing I do. And when I'm on the road, it's a little harder. I get about 5,000 to 6,000. And I'm not going to be a nut, because I'm not going to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and try to get the 2 miles in.
Yeah.
When I started doing it, it was the winter time. I was going to do it with a buddy of mine. I had a cup of coffee, and I got up and said, okay, now it's cold outside. Where are my gloves? And do I need layers? And do I have a hat here someplace? I spent about 3 or 4 minutes kind of being confused and wondering what's going on. I called him up and said, I'm not walking today. I went back and got a cup of coffee. And so he said, Pat, I hold, just like you said earlier, I make sure that all my clothes are set up the night before.
Uh-huh.
Really. Yeah. In a particular part of my house, he says, in the back porch, I got my gear, hats, gloves, whatever I would need. And it takes me about a minute or two, and I'm ready to go. And I started doing that. It took me about a week to get the routine down pretty well. But that's exactly what happens. I get up, I get a cup of coffee, put on stuff, whether I need sunscreen, whatever it is. Everything's ready, and I'm out the door. So I don't even think about it. So it's a routine. A lot of writers have routines.
Yeah. And what you're alluding to is we're removing the obstacles, the excuses, the rationalizations for not doing something, because procrastinators live on that.
Absolutely.
We live on those excuses and reasons not to. Oh, it's how many times have we, squandered a minute or two knowing that like gym's going to close at a certain time.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to get this email out. Oh no, now it's only 5 minutes. Now if I get there, I'll only have this much time. And then, we just stall until we don't do it. I was curious a little bit about what the other books are about. How much of a procrastinator can you be if you've written 12 books?
That was the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the point. Oh, here's another real important point.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that procrastinators are lazy, and it is not lazy. I am not a lazy person. I'm a very productive guy. I run a consulting firm for 30 years almost, 50 published papers. I mean, I'm productive, and I procrastinate. Well, like I said, around invoices and details, and I still procrastinate around my income tax, and I still find that to be a dinosaur I got to wrestle.
Yeah.
I'm very, very productive. Lazy people don't have stress, anxiety, or dread. And I got a good buddy of mine, Michael, who's one of the more talented people I've known. And if it doesn't get done today, Pat, yeah, we'll do it tomorrow, maybe Friday. Whenever we get around to it, we'll get it done. And but there's never any stress for me. I'm saying, geez, I got to get this done as soon as I can because Friday I got a full day. So that's the difference. Most procrastinators are not lazy people. They just have this habit.
Right.
They have a hard time managing.
Right. Yeah, that's a really important differentiator because there are people who just don't care. They don't
Yeah.
care about time, they're late, they're whatever. Those people don't consider it a problem.
No, oh, no,
That's
exactly. That's your
yeah,
problem
yeah.
because you're waiting for the person, but
Your
yeah, they
problem
don't
because you're
consider it a
waiting.
problem. They just say, well, it'll get to it. I mean, it's, it is, there are some lazy people, but most procrastinators are not lazy. They're just trying to deal with their habit. But the other books, I just finished a book on creativity. It's called Climbing Bubbles, How to Increase Your Creative IQ. So a lot of times people don't think they're creative, but we're all creative. And what this is a
Yeah.
small book, just like the procrastination book of 50 or 60 things you can do to kind of enhance your creativity. But most of the books have been around strategic planning, presidential transitions. McGraw-Hill published a lot of my work. So I've been kind of officially published by big names. But the last 3 or 4 years,
Right.
I've been doing the self-publishing. The procrastination book is a self-published book because I didn't want to wait 2 years to get it published. I mean, I've
Yeah.
in that run. And it was one of the more interesting books to write because, as you said earlier, I know it's going to help some people. I mean, creativity is a nice book to write, but procrastinators really suffer. They do. I mean, they have late income tax returns. They have late bank card receipts and get penalties. I got a good buddy of mine who does colostomy. He's a doctor, and about 15% of his clients cancel the day before.
Oh, wow.
They get stressed out and anxious. They
Hmm.
spot it next year sometimes. So even their health, dentists will tell you that. People come to the dentist sometimes and they got cavities. They come in when there's a lot of pain, which is a very not a good time to come in. I mean, you got to do it, but they avoid a lot of things and they pay a price both economically and also emotionally. And even career wise, oh, I'm going to get around to doing that job application or writing that grant application. I was a part of a
Yeah.
foundation years ago, and all these foundation grants would come in at 12 o'clock noon. I mean, everyone wait. They had a year to write the darn thing, but come in 12 o'clock noon. And it's not a good sign if you got to have a whole year to write a grant and the last hour you get the grant in. That tells the grantees or the grant
Right.
makers, like, what are these guys able to do here?
Right. And that's true too. Ben, that's why a doctor might say or a dentist might say, let's get you on the calendar,
Yep.
as soon as we can. Let's get this done right away. Because they know, they don't want to go through the motions of
Yes.
your surgery or procedure or whatever you're getting cold feet or cold teeth, as the case may be.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting with interacting with you. I think I've had four nice little reminders saying that we're going to have this. We're going to have this. This is the
Yeah.
time. Now, this technology can be very, very helpful because those reminders can let procrastinators know, okay, tomorrow I have to be ready for whatever this is. And
Right.
you can use technology to kind of get people motivated to do something and respond. But I thought those little reminders from your company were very helpful for me. I put it down on my calendar right away after we had talked.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
it's a nice little reminder.
Plus, what happens, Pat, is if you do have a reason or an excuse, or let's say somebody doesn't really want to do it, and they say, okay, well, they got the reminder a day before, they can say that a day before at least. That's better for everybody to get the
Yes,
get the news, sooner as
absolutely.
opposed to and I appreciate it as well. And I think I'm excited for the new book. When does the Climbing Bubbles book look to
That
be
just came
done?
out. That just came
Oh, it
out.
did. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and it's got a pretty good reception so far. And once again,
Great.
I'm a practitioner, so I know the theory. I read all the theory. I read all the time. But people want to have practical applications. And so the book, like the procrastination book, is full of these practical little things you can do to build and enhance your creativity. And it's a nice little book. The procrastination book's the favorite book I've written so far. The
Right,
creativity
right.
one really came from a colleague of mine who's a creativity consultant. And I always thought for years I was not really a creative person. I'm practical, I plan, I do things. And she said, oh no, you're a very creative person, and was able to point out where she saw me being creative. And all of a sudden I said, golly, I am more creative than I thought. We think sometimes with creativity, you have to be a dancer or a poet or a visual
Yeah.
artist. That's one type of creativity, but we're all creative in our own ways. And this book is trying to say, here's some things you can do if you're not an artist that can enhance your creativity. And so far, it's got a pretty nice reception.
Well, I love that because I've learned that, I've come to look at entrepreneurs as artists,
Oh,
creators. I for many years separated business and creativity
right.
as though they were not connected. And I found that was really to my detriment. I had so much more to offer and so much more knowledge to absorb and to use and to share that had to do with business. And I was like, well, why do I just assume that because I'm a writer or a performer or a speaker that I'm not a business artist, right?
Yes.
That
business artist.
I'm not a creative business person. And so that opened up a lot of doors. Well, where can people find you and find these marvelous books?
Yeah, it's Amazon Books, amazonbooks.com. They have 12 of my books out there. And the last couple ones are Creativity One, Climbing Bubbles. And it was interesting.
I love that. Yeah.
A good friend of mine was explaining a situation I was dealing with. A president had difficulties with their senior team. And she just made a flippant remark. She said, boy, that's like climbing bubbles. And I said, what? I said, wow, it just, that's the thing. You can borrow from other people. Now, I gave her
Right.
attribution in the first page of the book.
Sure.
But you can get, oh my Lord, it's not just your creativity. You can take and mix and match things. And so and then the other one, it was just a conversation with a colleague. And they were talking about, we always think IQ just is a certain kind of IQ, but there's a lot of people who have creative IQ. Like you as an artist had a creative IQ. And I said, creative IQ and climbing bubbles. And that's how we got to combine
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, my strategy with brands is the creative strategy is yes brand, which comes from the yes and rule of improv, where you add to, you're always adding to
Yes.
the other person's story, but you're never negating any of it. So, well, thank you so much for being on, Pat. I'm gonna let you close out with any final tidbit. You've given us a lot of really great strategies, but any additional strategy you want to throw out there?
If I got a minute, let me give you two quick ones.
Okay.
One's called temptation bundling. And what temptation bundling is when you marry something positive with something you don't want to do. So if you don't want to exercise, you exercise with a friend. Don't want to exercise, you exercise with headphones and your favorite music. You don't want to do the laundry and the ironing, you watch a movie while you're doing it. So you marry something positive with something negative. So when I do my income tax, I'm a sports buff. I have it all set up in my den, and I'm watching football, which is my favorite sport, watching football or baseball or golf. And I'll do it for 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm making my notes on my income tax. Now, it might take me 2 and 3 times longer, but I get it done. If I just sat down in the library in my home office and try to punch it out, that strategy never helps. So this notion around marrying something positive with something that's difficult, temptation bundling is very powerful. And then the last thing is something that Mark Twain said, and he was obviously a very smart guy and very famous, but he said if you have 2 frogs to eat the biggest one first. And procrastinators will never eat the biggest one first. And so what they might do is they might eat the small task or frog first by chewable chunks, making it social activity, doing it with a friend, doing some temptation bundling, and then having a nice reward at the end of that. So if they tackle the small frog or the small task first, now all of a sudden I've got some success, motivation, I feel pretty confident, and then I have some strategies that have worked with the small task I can apply to the bigger task. So sometimes if you have a small task, get that done, you can create momentum. That creates motivation to tackle the bigger task. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.